there is this differentiation between two phases in the modern society of capitalism. You have the Bois society, and then you have the Proletariat, which is seen as a crisis that needs to be overcome. No, it's not the code. Well, capitalism needs to be overcome.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm really confused here. Yes. So, the proletariat is a product of the So basically, both share the same reputation of the objectivity of the social existence in sense of they raise same immediacy, but in a different level of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So the Bourgeois seen as so they can be seen as isolated from social reality, and even though they appear as conscious subject, they seek to there is they can be seen as having an incomplete self-consciousness. So basically, sorry, it's just really difficult.
It is very difficult.
I had it so well planned. Object. So the concrete. So make more from. I don't want to just read it. Sorry. Own freedom, about to make more from. So basically, being within the society, they seem to be satisfied with the consciousness of being within the capitalism, and okay, that doesn't make sense. I'm sorry.
All right, let's.
So basically, being in oh my god. So,
Oh, don't worry. Let's, all right, it's hard. It's really hard. Okay, let's all right, let's start.
No.
Yeah.
So.
Just on a simple level, what is the basic point of what he's trying to argue in this text about? What is it about?
Proletariat begins to realize what's basically no. So no, again, I have it. I know it. So the capitalist system, as you know, the quantitative gains of the capitalist system.
Yeah.
Need to be translated into a qualitative change of the proletariat.
Okay.
And so basically move towards not only a form of consciousness of a class, but also social possibilities and freedom and potential in possibility of a social change.
Yes?
Yes?
Yeah, right. Right, okay, let's right, I think you can go to basics here. I mean, okay, who's familiar with Lukacs at all before reading this? Anybody? Okay. Who's familiar with Hegel? Hegel. A bit, okay. Who's familiar with Marx? Okay, so that's some start. I mean, look, it's deep cooked in Hegel, right? That's why it's infuriating to read. Because Hegel and Heidegger, made it their business to it's like a sign of a high-quality commodity in their eyes, isn't it? That it's extremely difficult to read, But that's the Hegelian influence is very strong in this text, which is why it's stylistically difficult. But it is valuable. I think it's extremely valuable when we get to grips with it. And it's actually trippy as well. It's actually, it tries to conceal this almost by this ponderous Hegelian system, but it's extremely trippy what he's talking about. Partly because it is about consciousness. Now, a lot of the dispute about, why this is valuable, I think, and as I said in the mail I sent out to people, I think it's easier to understand it once you've read the Hartsock text, what's at stake in this, because she's strongly influenced by this text, and basically, what she saw she was doing in a feminist standpoint was translating. She's doing more than that, but at a crude level, she's translating Lukacs' arguments from class to gender, and in developing it, she develops this idea of standpoint, which she and others then contribute to this thing called standpoint epistemology, which is mind-blowing, I think. It is mind-blowing. When it sort of did blow my mind when I first heard this theory. It's interesting. It kind of it's been known. It's a long time, more than 30 years ago, more like 40 that the theory was developed. But it's still little known. Standpoint epistemology. I'm not surprised. And it's David Graeber in his last book on. It's a really good book on bureaucracy. Mentions at the end standpoint epistemology, saying, but what I've been arguing here, much of what I've been arguing in this book can be summed up, I've learned by standpoint epistemology, of which I was not aware. It was interesting, I think, why that is. The book by David Graeber, it's called The Utopia of Rules. Oh. Yeah. You mentioned standpoint epistemology at the end. Yeah. I think it's highly important because it's really quite an explosive theory, which breaks with a lot of the key dualisms, which still operate in what I think we still have to call postmodern thought. Where you either have objective truth, which is defined in some naive way, it's already there, or you have relativism. Nothing is really true. Nothing is true at all. So you've like Poe-faced Anglo-Saxon empiricists saying, things are what they are, roast beef, that kind of thing. Or you have, in the other stereotype, continentalists who have to complicate everything and say that nothing is fixed or stable and you can't assign determinate meaning to anything. Standpoint epistemology really breaks with both of those positions. It's saying that there are different points of view, but some are better than others. The different, the standpoint is different from a point of view, you could say, first of all. And this relates straight away to this complicated question of consciousness here. Now, I think most of you are somewhat familiar with Marx. Well, no, one of Marx's key emphases is on the primacy of the material. Something that Nancy Hartsock talked about. The primacy of the material over the idea. The primacy, in other words, of practice over mental conception. And sometimes that primacy is viewed as more than a primacy, but it's actually causal. That the material causes mental conceptions. And that's complicated on lots of levels. Complicated, controversial in the history of Marxism. How we think of this relation between mental conceptions and more broadly culture and materiality. Materiality doesn't only mean physical things, it also means practice. Now, right, well, I've put too many parentheses in, I've lost myself. Right, okay. So, with that emphasis on the primacy of the practical and of material, it might seem that consciousness lies on the side of the ideal. Right, consciousness surely must be mental conception, must be an idea. And Marx thought his materialist revolution was to stand things on the head, to put matter and practice first, and idea second. But what is meant by consciousness? That is, in this sense, what is meant by class consciousness? It is not the same as ordinary phenomenal consciousness or phenomenological consciousness. Okay. So all of this is embedded in the point of the standpoint. I remember the standpoint is not a point of view. Point of view, we can all have points of view, and we all do have them. They're already there. But a standpoint has to be constructed. It has to be constructed, so it is by practice. And the easiest way to see this, I think, is by the concept of consciousness raising. And this was in a way what Nancy Hartsock was trying to codify in her theory of standpoint epistemology, was the practice of consciousness raising. Okay. So anyone want to describe what consciousness raising is? How does it work? All right. Well, what would happen? It's a powerful molecular process, I would argue, and it's not really necessary for any group consciousness to develop is via consciousness raising. So it's developed by feminists. I don't know when it started, to be honest, but it's certainly very prevalent by the time of the 70s as a strategy. And the power of it is the simplicity of it, partly. That all you need is the members of the group together. And, they will talk, when they talk together, honestly and openly, they'll start to see that they have common problems and common interests. And also that the cause of those problems is not them. It will be something else. Simply it's not me, it's patriarchy. Would be the revelation. I don't clean the house enough. I always feel bad for not doing that. Well, the problem is not that you haven't cleaned the house enough. The problem is that the set of expectations around that kind of work, gendering, all that kind of thing, which then become denaturalized. The thing is, this is what Lukacs meant by immediacy. The problem of immediacy. The problem of immediacy is reifying, which is one of the big concepts of Lukacs, right? What's meant by reification? Anyone want to have a go? sorry to have trouble finding it.
Yes.
Yeah, I do that. I found the room myself like at 9:30. I'd always send a message out to everybody. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. It's a nicer room though, right? It's a much nicer room. Well, we're here till the end of term. Then we get shoved somewhere else. I do have trouble finding it. Yeah, sorry. Can you remind me of your name? Sorry. Okay. Okay. Right. Where was I?
You talked about the thing in itself. So it's
okay, reification. Right.
Yeah.
So what does it mean, reification? Yeah, I mean, fairly literally, like thingification. Okay, so one of the themes you've noticed running through this, through Lukacs' work and this text in particular, is that a common philosophical theme, a well-known philosophical theme of becoming versus being. Okay. With the idea that ideology reifies. Ideology turns what is always a process of becoming, which is open-ended and therefore changeable, into something which is fixed and permanent. That's what a reification is. And of course that's crucial. That's the very purpose of ideology. Right? The very purpose of ideology is to close off the possibility that anything could be different. That is the A to Z of ideology. But of course the second step of ideology is to make itself disappear. Ideology doesn't arrive and say, I am ideology. Right? Ideology says, I am nature, and this is how things are. Probably doesn't speak. But I mean, even on my level of my metaphor, it doesn't really have to say anything. It's we who must think in response to it. This is how things are. They can't be any different. So here we can. I think we have the basic contours in place now of what's at stake there, which is reification, ideology. The fixed products of ideology, naturalization, on the one hand. On the other hand, consciousness. But consciousness is only developed via practice. So that consciousness raising, to come back to that, what's the difference between consciousness raising and simply knowing something? Yeah.
Just knowing.
Yes.
Just knowing something is about that immediate reality, what it is. It needs to be objectified.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But paradoxically, the objective level is the level of relations, right? Not the level of things. So that's what he's always suggesting. So he's happy. This is a thing that I think is odd for us today, is the confidence with which Lukacs and still Hartsock will use the term science, and knowledge, confidence. No, they're not. So this is not a pure relativism. It's well, as I was saying before, it's neither a relativism nor is it the old view of an objective truth that's already out there lying, waiting for us. Because the other key concept of Lukacs, totality, our friend totality. Totality just means the whole system. You can't understand any bit of the system, any bit of the system, without understanding the whole system. And the whole system is not a thing, remember, it is a set of relations. And this is why why immediacy is such a problem. Immediacy is inherently ideologically mystifying. Because the totality is not given in immediacy. Just look at it this way. And part of the difficulty you could say people have it and are struggling against things. Patriarchy is not going to come in here and announce itself any more than ideology is. Okay, so it's a bit like, in Thatcher says there's no such thing as society. It's the same sort of claim because, okay, well, we can't see it, can you? It's not given an immediacy, this society. What do you so when Lukacs talks about the bourgeoisie and the thought mired in immediacy, that's exactly it, the English take this to an absurd. We're world masters of taking this to an absurd degree of things are only what they are, and no more, and probably a little bit less. So capitalism itself is not given in experience. Okay, capitalism is you have to construct it in consciousness. It isn't given to you. Your work is given to you. What you do is given to you. Your little bit is given to you. The totality is not given to you in experience. Never. Your experience is only your experience. And not even that. It doesn't belong to you because both you and your experience are already ideologically packaged. In order, and that's what I meant. It's trippy quite quickly. Because this is what he's saying. That's also why a standpoint is not a point of view, because the standpoint is constructed by consciousness then, as not given an immediacy. But then it gets even more kind of psychedelic, because part of the problem with the idea of the old idea of objective truth, you could say, was its idea that consciousness has no effect on the truth. That might well be true of the state of a black hole or something like that. My consciousness is no effect. It can't possibly be true of social relations. I'm in those social relations. I'm already in those social relations. Right? So when I, and it can't be me alone, ever, right? Who does this? When group consciousness develops, when class consciousness develops, when a consciousness of any subordinated group develops, this immediately changes things straight away. Because in being lifted out of experience, you're broken out of ideology. You and I'm using this as a second person plural. You can then act. You can then achieve an agency. You can then achieve agency. You can't achieve it before. But even before you do anything, something has happened, which is the production of this new consciousness, which is something. So we think about the set of social relations. Something has shifted in the set of social relations by the sheer fact your consciousness has shifted anyway. Right? That's the first thing. So it's already changed things. Secondly, then, once a group recognizes its common interests, then it can act together. Once workers realize the problem is capital, not them. Once they stop competing against one another and realize they have a common enemy, capital, this is when they can have agency. Similarly, when women realize the problem is patriarchy, not them as individuals, then, their consciousness immediately shifts. You'll feel better. That's the first thing. One thing, you'll feel relief from the kind of guilt and misery of having to take responsibility for your own life, which you shouldn't have to. Despite everything neoliberal propaganda tells us, it is not you. A direct inversion of Thatcher. There's no such thing as society. There are only individuals and their families. It's the other way around, right? There's no such thing as the individual. But the individual is immediately given. And that's part of the problem with the media. So you could say that. So this sets up the... Yes, please.
The question.
Yeah.
I think it's in very crude terms, but just trying to get my head around. Could you then say, again, very crude terms, that we're talking about the totality of the standpoint and so on, that the standpoint and the realization of consciousness that goes along with it is in some way finding this group's position in the whole totality of capitalism, like thinking this in spatial terms now.
Yes.
Okay. Might rather be going to, I'm thinking of Frederick Jameson and cognitive mapping.
Yes. Well, that's straightforwardly, cognitive mapping. I mean, Jameson written extensively on Lukacs, and cognitive mapping is a direct application of this, of direct application of this stuff. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So but of course, then that double thing immediately happens as soon as they realise their position. They change it. It's like the ship. They're not in because they've de-reified it. They've de-reified it by.
That would be my next question.
Yes, go on.
Would Lukacs say then this is always already then a new reification, like finding a position, as seems quite rather again being than becoming like very frozen. So I was wondering if for Lukacs then that this would always already the metaphor of a matter also would be the problem in itself, because it again suggests that a process of reification.
Well, okay, but
maybe
okay,
that's
no.
too far.
This is good points. I think. Well, what is the difference between mapping and a map, though?
Okay.
So, mapping would be not presuppose a map necessarily. That that sounds more like Sartre. You know, like this is the kind of thing that he got into with critique of dialectical reason, which I haven't read, but few have, to be fair. You think it's about that big. He wrote it on speed, and yeah, and like you know what happens when people write on speed? They think it's brilliant. Others, no. But I think that there's a real problem that Sartre touches on, which is this one about what happens when the group in becoming, when it escapes, and this is influential on Deleuze and Guattari as well. When they what happens? The group in becoming, it comes together, overthrows the old order. Hold on, then it then becomes reified, becomes a thing. I don't know if Lukacs is so much troubled by that, but I wouldn't say I'm an overall expert on his work, so that he may be. But the standpoint. The standpoint is not a thing, though, right? It's a form of consciousness, you could say. It's a form of consciousness which is then. So you see yourself as a member of the proletariat. In Hartsock terms, you see yourself as a woman. You don't see yourself as an individual in that way. But this is hard work. This part of the reason that it's not, it's not a thing. It's not. You can't really ratify it because it's a practice. In order to see yourself like that, it's hard work, and it requires a lot of sustaining. That's partly why consciousness raising is not just the same as knowing something. I might well know that I'm a worker, or I might well know that I'm a woman oppressed by patriarchy or whatever. But it's different being able to constantly act on that knowledge, or to act in terms of that knowledge, which is, that's because all of the pressures coming from immediacy are going in the other direction. They're saying, you're an individual. These things don't really exist today. Abstractions, patriarchy, capitalism. Look, what's that? What's that? The tables there, you can see that. That's real. Other people are there. You can see them. They're real. This thing is not really that real, is it? You've got this nagging. This is kind of the background noise of ordinary phenomenological consciousness. And certainly in most societies, certainly capitalist societies. So the task of creating a different form of consciousness that could persist, where you're always thinking in those other terms. At least in the first instance. Because the point is, for Lukacs anyway, I don't know if Hartsock thinks in the same way. I don't know if she's a gender abolitionist, but Lukacs is a class abolitionist. And this is one of the sort of paradoxical things that he's pointing to, isn't it? That class is not given an immediacy in capitalist society, first of all. Step one. There is no such thing as class. It isn't there. There are just individuals. Some have made more money than others. This is the point of difference between the capitalist system and and feudalism, right? But no one can argue in feudalism that people got where they were because they deserved it, or people got them because of hard work. You couldn't argue that. No one even thought of arguing that way. Hard work was the plebs anyway. The whole other story. But your place in the social hierarchy was symbolically fixed. In other words, it was acknowledged in the eyes of, I can't call it the big other. It was acknowledged that there was a social hierarchy and positions within that. That's what it was to be a feudal society. Capitalism says there isn't any of that. There are only individuals confronting one another. Some have done better than others. And then, then we hear that whole other set of things being packed into that. Some have done better than others because they worked harder than others. If you want to do that well, you should work hard too. So what is denied in that is a fundamental split. So there is a fundamental split between groups. And in classical Marxist theory, the distinction was between, how does the distinction go? How do we divide up the two great classes? What defines the bourgeoisie? Yeah. I mean, that's why it's problematic. That's why this is problematic. One of the reasons this becomes problematic in today's world is what is production now, and what is ownership. It's much clearer in Marx's day, right? You own a factory. You owned a factory. Okay, you own a factory. So what are you trying to do? Okay, you're trying to. So you put some money into that factory, and part of that money goes to the hardware, the machine of the factory, and part of it goes to the workers. But to you, they're essentially the same, aren't they? Paying for workers and paying for machinery is not that different. What are you trying to do? Well, you're simply trying to make more money than you put in. If you don't, it's not capitalism, is it? But more money must come out than it's gone in. And part of what Marx is saying is that there's enough. I'm slightly going off on tangent, but let's go with it. But the bourgeoisie think that they are the agents of this process. That they are what make things happen. That they know money to make things happen. But you could say that capital is more real than they are. That's what I was saying now. In terms of contemporary society, capital is more real than you are. But in immediacy, it seems the opposite. It seems that you're more real than capital. What could be more solid than you? And you could, immediacy will always be that way. That's what immediacy is. Right. So, but it's the same for the bourgeoisie. You see, they don't. That's why they don't know. They are the puppets of this process. You could say. But capital is more. So from their point of view, they're putting more money in, they're making more money. From capital's point of view, they're just the means by which it grows. Okay, and this process is, in principle, infinite. And has to be that. Always has to be more. This is in the nature of capitalism. Because capital is not money. In a sense, it's not like cash in your pocket. Capital is money. Capital is money meant to make more money. cash in your pocket is not, presumably not going to. You might use it to bet with or something like that. But most, when you have the cash in your pocket, it's because you're going to spend it. But the way capitalists spend money is not the same as the way it's not the same as you are like buying a coffee, right? Because of the speculative dimension of it. But you investment dimension of it. But they're spending that money in order that more money can be made. And there's no end to that process. There can't be. So, yeah, from the point of view of capital then, which we can say, capital is certainly an ideological construction, but it's less ideological than you are. Human bourgeoisie just means of it being produced. And so this is the big Hegelian story in that sense, is of human potentiality, or the human production being split off from the products of human activity being split off from the humans who produced them, and coming back as a quasi-autonomous force. And because, that might sound complicated, but it's fairly simple, isn't it? Like, if we think about it, that this is, what is the economy? It's not that. Why can't anybody, if the economy, which is the biggest reification of all, but nevertheless a real thing at a certain level of reality. The point that reification produces real effects, and that nobody can buy it. Nobody, including and especially capitalists, can will the financial crisis of 2008 away. Yet, it's absent human beings from the picture. There is no financial crisis. So it's entirely an affair of human consciousness, the economy, in that sense. Yet humans have no power to affect it. It's like weather, right? The economy is like weather. Now, there's people who can be experts in what the weather's going to do and profit from that. But they can't change the weather. Not a fundamental level. So I think this is part of what's being pointed to. It's fundamental. What is capitalism? Capitalism then would be this system whereby this, alienation, to use the term famously, of human capacities is taken to its absolute limit. It's a monstrously, prodigiously productive system. Yet it's not under. Yet it's also one which seems to, which does exploit and oppress the majority of the population, and which even the minority have, limited capacity to alter. So partly then what this narrative is about then is the developing of consciousness. The bourgeoisie cannot have consciousness. They can't see how things really are. This is part of what I think is important about what is being said here. They cannot. The proletarian does not, by virtue of being a proletarian alone, see the true nature of things. Only by virtue of what we can call consciousness raising. This term was not available to Lukacs. Only by process of consciousness raising, by practice of consciousness raising, can they achieve that? It's not, so you can't read it off it as an empirical sociological thing. But what is it about capacities? Like there's the potential with the proletariat. The proletariat has the potential to grasp the totality. The bourgeoisie lacks that potential because it's too mired in ideology. Why is it mired in ideology? Well, partly it's mired in ideology because these papers a bit too mobile. Why is it mired in ideology? Because it's partly because its experience is not discontinuous. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, it generates the ideology, right? So it generates it, so it lives inside it. If you're in a subordinated group, you see the way things are talked about by the dominant group, and you see the reality of your life, and they don't match up. Ordinarily, before your consciousness has been raised, you will treat the mismatching of your experience from ideology as a failing in you, right? You must have thought of it wrong. You must have got it a bit wrong. You mustn't be thinking about it the right way. After consciousness raising, you can see that of course it's not going to match up. That there are two fundamentally different ways of being in the world. There are the ways of the dominant group and the ways of the subordinate. But precisely because the dominant group dominates, it can't see that. Because it lives inside its own structure of dominance. Whereas because the subordinate group is subordinated, it has the potential to see the schism. Yeah. No. Interrupt anytime.
So if the dominant group, I guess, is so much stuck in this capitalist society, then for whose gain is it ultimately?
Is what?
Capitalism.
Well, exactly.
I know that's kind of the point, but then, yeah.
No, that is the point. I think at least, I don't know if Lukacs would see it that way, but I certainly see it that way. I think Marxists would see it that way. The point of, that's what I meant about capital is the driver. The capital then is like purposiveness without purpose, or whatever Kant says, like this endless driving. There's no final purpose to it. There's an end point to it itself. And okay, this I think brings us very close to the core theme of this module in a way, because you could say, partly that makes it flat with the structure of desire itself.
But then we're so stuck in it that it just feels like there's no way out at all. Because if the most dominant people in our society can't even see it.
Yeah, but their dominance is Their dominance, you've got to distinguish between empirical power, right, now, and knowledge, right. This is important. That their very empirical power means that they lack the capacity to develop knowledge. The subordination of the subordinated group is the potential, gives them the potential to develop knowledge. Knowledge can become the basis for agency. Agency can really change things. So only the subordinated have the potential to really change things. The dominated are dominated themselves by their own ideology. They're inside a dream from which they cannot awake. I think that's a good example in the Nancy Hartsock piece about cleaning the toilet. She talks about that. that there's a reality of, for the, I guess, for in that scenario, the sort of men who are walking around with their high-flown ideas about X, Y, and Z, they're completely ignorant of the reality of believing in toilet and for what that means. Which is a kind of metonym for all immersion in kind of materiality, or anything that is like anything that operates as the basis for sociality as such, or simply the reproduction, or social reproduction, or the reproduction of humans. Having the thing is, in a way, you could say the lowest level materiality, having access to the lowest level materiality of things, gives you the potential to have more knowledge of how things, of totality. Come back to that. Because you're in the totality. The thing is that the dominant group will just float by and not really notice you that much. It's part of the reason they don't serve as think of totality. Not yet.
But basically what you're saying is that these two groups are concealed or closed in a way that you can't have people who are, moving from one group to the other in certain exceptions. Whereas it is sometimes the case.
Well, I don't think it means that you can't move from one to the other. Because what is it to be? The thing is, what is it to be in a class? I think it's a lot harder to move than people think. One, and two. I don't know what two was. I mean, this is a very important question. It touches on lots of things. Yeah.
The separation of the conscious class of worker class, that is a subject that we are going to have in the next week. So the working class in which ideology is working in the dominant ideology, but they don't know, or they are working. They are acting, behaving as a against them. I don't know if I'm explaining it.
Sorry, who's behaving against them?
The working class. So if the working class consciousness or the working class, as we are going to read in the next week, I think, has disappeared as a class that go together to against dominant ideas. Yeah. So where is this working class now? In which
okay, that's a good question. These are really important questions. Both of these questions are very important. Right, and I think they're related in a way. Okay. I want to come back to this first question about moving between classes. Yeah, I think they are related. Yeah, I think they are related. Moving between classes, right? Why that's not that? It's not that easy to do it. Well, one, it's about what your base level, Kantian terms, transcendental assumptions are. That, in other words, things that you take for granted and don't really think about at all. If you're in the open class, if you're in the open class, you will have those set of expectations. They've been bred into you. you've been taught that way, you've been schooled that way, all of your home environment is telling you you are that kind of person. Can you ever lose that? Can you ever lose that? Even if you're, often we've got these fantasies about, about the very powerful, just get them sent to jail. Even if they go to jail, they'll still be fine. It's because that sense of entitlement will persist, right? Will persist regardless of what happens to them, in a way. Do you know what I mean? I think I've gone beyond Lukacs here, but just do it the other way around. Any number of fictions about this, isn't it? The difficulty of, the greatest English novel of the way, Great Expectations, I think. It's certainly one of the great, the great novels about class, I think. Right. Well, okay. That is the fundamental. Great Expectations, right? You all know the story. Maybe. Okay, so I don't want to spoil it for you. Okay, so it's Pip, who is brought up by a sort of common blacksmith, and who is one day taken to the house of a very rich woman to play in front of her, and is subjected to the kind of gaze and judgment of this woman's ward, a young girl called Estella. And as soon as this happens, Pip becomes ashamed of himself. It's just hard, it's unbearable. Like, he had not realised that he had common boots. He didn't know that. But when he's gone to Miss Havisham's house and seen Estella, she's told him, why do you call Jack's names? Why do you talk that way? After that, he is ashamed. So he becomes like, this is the difference between self-consciousness, right? Extreme acute self-consciousness and class consciousness. He precisely lacks class consciousness at this point, right? Because class consciousness is not only consciousness that you're a member of a class, it's consciousness of the class system as a set of structures determining how you see yourself. Right. This is exactly what is obscured. The moment he becomes aware of his class status, he ceases to be aware of class as a power over him. And then, the rest of them, really quite long story short. He comes into money, and I won't spoil the whole thing for you by telling you how he does that ultimately. He comes into money, and then, I can't really talk about it. One of the most horrible scenes in English literature. He comes into money. He fully identifies with the ruling class, or tries to, but he's awkward. He doesn't really fit in with them, it's because he knows that he doesn't have the background, and old money's better than new. Lots of music. Give Brian Ferry's credit, he lived anyway. I'm sorry.
And also, his own self-knowledge of his own social situation, I think it's something that...
but his self-knowledge is precisely reified. It's not knowledge. It's a reified form of knowledge, right? So that it's ideology, which is to do with shame, intense shame, and when Joe, who's the blacksmith who's looked after him, because he's an orphan, comes to London to visit him. It's just Pip is ashamed of him. Pip is ashamed of him, and it shows the shame, to Joe, which is just unbearable at this point. So not everyone will endure these traumas necessarily when they move from one to try to move from one class to another. But I think that it's not as simple as acquiring wealth. or acquiring means of production. Which I think is partly problematic about the Marxist definition of it anyway, the strict Marxist definition. Because part of the problem is, like, okay, if it's about means of production only, ownership of means of production, well then I can acquire means of production tomorrow. Simply like, because it doesn't, in theory, that could happen to anybody. Could win the lottery. But it doesn't. We need to account for what is that fixes people in relation to that ownership or not of the means of production. What does that mean? That some people accept that they are never going to own anything, whereas others, think the opposite. They think, of course, I am the owner. I'm going to work. I'm not going to be a worker like that. So I think that is. It's not that easy to move from one group to another. And I think it's pretty clear from the Hartsock thing, right, that it's not that easy to move from being in the dominant group to being in the subordinate group. Or rather, it's not that, and vice versa. What's that other question? Yes, about the experience of the working class, right. Next week we sort of paused that story before the disappearance of the working class. Actually, it's when there was still a working class. Actually, that's the bit I wanted to take from that text. But you can say that this is where we are now, right? This is where we allegedly are now. This is what endlessly tolerant. Right, nothing could be more topical than this than the American election. Right, where suddenly we're hearing about class again. But we've been told for years that class doesn't really exist. Class doesn't really exist anymore. No, we're all middle class now. We're all middle class now. Nobody's saying that now. It's really interesting. Partly because they want to scapegoat the white working class. We're hearing about class so that a certain class can be blamed for things, or a certain ethnicized class can be blamed. Partly that. Okay, I think partly then that reflects the complications of what has happened in capitalism when there isn't a simple relationship between means of production, ownership of means of production, and domination in the way there used to be. Because you can not own. Like I say, but now that capital is so free floating from production in the old sense. It's not about I've got a factory making shoes, right? That isn't the way it goes. Almost because of everything Marx said, that when capital runs the show, shoes aren't only significant in terms of what they can be realised in terms of capital. So then you get capital itself, you get better in capital itself, you get all this stuff that, of course I can't understand it. We're not supposed to understand it any more than we're supposed to understand the Roman Catholic Church at the time of, the Middle Ages. You're not supposed to understand it. It's a whole economy is theology, and economics is the science of reification, you could say. But part of what that means is, there's different ways of looking at what's happened. So-called post-Fordism, which we'll come on to. The shift away from, certainly in the global north, from manufacturing model, male workers, 9-to-5 jobs, 40 hours a week for 40 years of your life. The shift away from that to flexibility, precariousness, outsourcing of the of manufacture to the third world, all of that kind of thing. You can say that all of that was done in order to prevent class consciousness from developing. Because class consciousness was strong, and how does it was strong, it was manifest. People saw themselves in those terms. They had made gains, made significant gains. Capital wanted a way of overturning that, came up with all this stuff. And at its point of high magic, made the very concept of class disappear, which was unthinkable. It was unthinkable in Britain or the US, or, you know, well, I don't know about elsewhere. I mean, I do know a bit about elsewhere, but I speak confidently about those countries. But it's unthinkable in the 1970s that you say that class would basically disappear as a way of a form of self-understanding. You know, within 20 years. But it did for a while. But did that mean that? There's at least two levels of what class is then, aren't there? You know, there's class as a form of consciousness, and there's class as a form of domination. And the forms of domination persist, but the forms of consciousness have been broken, you could say. And you know, I think what you're describing is the trap that was set. It's almost like they read this. Well, it's not almost like that. They do that. They know how class consciousness was produced. You know, because it's easier to produce it in conditions where there is physical proximity. It's like with the consciousness phrasing, right? Like when people can talk to each other together, then they can. Well, when people have common experiences and they can talk about them, right? Then you've got the potential for developing consciousness very quickly. That's why workers not allowed to talk. Don't really talk. And in one place where I worked, when I went to further education, you know, the head of human resources was exasperated like the development of like some sort of class consciousness amongst the teachers was like, well, you can't just sit in a pub and talk to each other. But you actually said that. But you know, like you can't do. Well, what do you mean? You know, it was like the usually unspoken rule. You're not supposed to do that. That's not what, you know. You can go to a pub and just talk rubbish. You can't go to a pub and talk about the conditions of your work together. Don't do that. You can't do that. That's not, you know. And that's, yeah, so okay, you know, that there's, so a lot of these strategies are then, you can say almost all of it then, look at it that way, look at it, what does capital want to get out of it? What must capital always do? Capital must always, if you go back to Marcuse, you know, must prevent that awareness amongst people that they could live differently and have more control of their own lives. They must prevent that. It has to do it. It has to keep doing it. Whereas it's you know, the capitalists moan about hard work, and it is hard work. It never stops. You always have to keep preventing that potential. And like, it's totally imminent, right? It has to be prevented in universities as well. You know, what do you think about Marxization of universities? That's all that's about. You know, is to stop. Like, universities were a red base, so-called. Marxization, they don't make any money out of it. It's not about that. It's just about stopping certain kinds of consciousness developing, conditions for them developing. You know, because people were taken out of workplace for a while. You know, young people taken out of the workplace, free from those imperatives. They don't have a certain, and it thinks about time, right? In order to raise consciousness, you need time, and that's just difficult. Always, you know. Well, am I going to leave my house now? I'm tired, right? I've done, you know, if you're a woman, I'd probably, you know, still, like, you've done a double day of work. So you've done work in the normal sense, then you've done domestic work on top of that. Still overwhelmingly done by women more than men, right? So you've done that. Then do you want to go out and raise your consciousness? Yeah, well, yeah, okay, it's kind of, yeah, but, you know, I'm kind of tired, right? But I mean, we can laugh about it, but clearly this is what we all do this. we all do this. We've all got forms of this where we sort of know it's like healthy eating or something. You know it's better for you, but why don't you do it? It's not because, again, it's about you might know things, but you're not able to act on them. It can't be hard on ourselves about it. Time poverty is real. And that's part of what they've done. That's why they want it. Scarcity of time. There's no need for it, right? We could all be, as Marcuse said, we could all be working much less now. But it's the insanity of it, right? The full insanity of the capitalist system. That that they produce an artificial scarcity of time in order to produce a real scarcity of natural resources. Right? That's effectively what's happening. So in order, your production of spurious commodities that nobody wants, slippers with faces of alligators or whatever, imagine when you see those sort of things, the amount of work that's gone into them, and the amount of natural resources gone to transporting them from wherever to get to Lewisham, where they're left to town, so whatever. That's a whole other. It's not good. But it has to continually inhibit the capacity for consciousness, to develop consciousness. And it's done a very good job. It's done a very good job. And if it denies, time, you could say time is the fundamental means of production of everything. Often seems to me in the world today like where it's like some fairy tale where there's a let's say in that room over there there's a magical golden machine that can make anything you want. It's just there. You can do it. But you don't have time to go in there. You can have the machine that is the most wondrous thing imaginable. But if you don't have the time to use it, it might as well not be there. And that's where we are. That's where we are in terms of the capacities of what human capacities are at the moment, and what the capacities of the things produced by humans are. Let's put it that way at the moment, and what the capacity of human agency to use those things is. That this is very very divergent. And time poverty, you could say, is generalized. It's not like read CEOs when they talk about all this stuff about what they do. It's see, it's not like the old vision of exploitation, right? Where the fat kind of owners with cigars and top hats sit with their heads on their feet on the skulls of workers. It's not really like that. If it ever was, it is that they lead by example, right? The capitalist class. They're just this weird form of addict. Work addict. Yeah. I get up at 4:30. Check 200 emails before go in the gym for half an hour. See my kid for 15 minutes. Go to work there till about 8 o'clock. Grab a quick dinner. Work some more. Go to bed. Repeat. That's not even a caricature, really. That's all more or less what they say. Right. So that it's a generalized kind of condition of time poverty. And of course, consciousness cannot develop in those conditions. Because your consciousness is not automatic, right? That's the thing. It's not immediate. Immediate is the name for automatic. It's always vulnerable. That's the thing. It's always vulnerable to falling back into rarefied categories coming from immediacy. And so that that requires this time of endless reconfirmation. And that's why the ideal thing is if they give us things well within our own time. Imagine if you could invent something like that. You know, where you just endlessly distract yourself. You know, where at any point in the world you could be reached. At any point of the world, any time in the world, you could be reached by the imperatives of capitalism. Where, you know, imagine an object like that. What would it look like? Right. Well, yes, exactly. Yeah. So now we can see why they distribute phones practically for nothing. But because you can imagine phones used in another way, perhaps. But surely this is their function, right, in the contemporary world, is to ensure that we're tethered to. The thing is, it's direct inversion, right? That all of their language of relationality, communication, all of that is actually about. Look, it's not that fucking hard for me to talk to you. It's not that hard. You know, but it is hard if I've got no time. And the thing is to stack. So first of all, they make it seem as if it's hard, and you need it. You need capital in order to communicate with people. You know, you need the products of capital in order to relate to another person. Of course, what that means is that you're not related to people, or not straightforwardly. If we can talk about anything straightforward in this Lukacs world, but it means that everything is being hived off or rooted through capital. So capital installs itself as this kind of parasite. This is kind of when we'll go with Nagli and the autonomy. You know that this is essentially their argument that capital will install itself as a parasite on human relationships, and it's clearly where we are, right? People didn't really dream that. You couldn't dream of it. Well, you could, but it's kind of. You know, the level of domination the level at which capital can encroach on people's lives now. You know, even 30, 40 years ago, I don't think, like I say, you wouldn't have dreamt of it. And that's part of the shift from this Fordist thing, where you're at work. I mean, again, this is problematic. It's interesting from the gender point of view. But this is capital's point. This is capital. The way capital operates with equality. Okay, it used to be the case that only women did the double day. Now everyone does the double day in some form or another. You could say that, okay, men might not be doing housework still, but they're not sitting beyond the imperatives of capitalism in the evening. No. You know, just think about it. You know, when male workers of the classic Fordist type went home, okay, so they're engaged in social reproduction, which was for the benefit of capitalism, as well as for their own benefit. Right. So that was going on, sure. But they weren't subject to the direct imperatives of capital at home. You know, there was a qualitative shift in life. Again, with gendered problems of all sorts in this picture. It's not like it was a great time. But now there's no freedom from the imperatives of capital. And like I say, it's a kind of voluntary form of voluntary compulsion, right? If that makes sense, which it sort of doesn't. But like, nobody makes you in that sense. Nobody makes you own a phone. You know. No, and if you do own it, nobody makes you go on social media. You know, and of course, you know, if you're on social media, then you are producing for capitalism.
I think even now, sometimes now, even when you apply for jobs, they check through your social media, and they need to check these platforms. So you kind of need one in some ways now.
Yeah. So you need one. It's part of your responsibility for yourself that you have to curate your own subjectivity. but also that, you know, and then there's also that you're producing it. It's nothing without you, right? There's obviously no social media by definition unless we're on it. So there's some argue in the strict Marxist sense whether this can be considered productive of capital. But leaving aside the precise semantic details about it, look, it's clear though that it depends on our participation in it, and that participation is, as it were, freely given. Well, in a double sense, it's freely given in that nobody makes me, and secondly, nobody pays me. But you also have to see that what might be going on in that time. Well, what used there to be for people to do. Well, people would go to, you know, a working class might go to night school. They might go to trade union night school. You know, they might go to trade union reading groups, which a lot of people did where they read things like Lukacs. You know, so this is, you know, I think it's, you know, very concrete, lots of levels now. There's a good piece by Gary Young, I don't know if people read it in The Guardian about Trump, and he'd spent about a month, I think, in a typical town in the US. And, you know, he says that when you take away the union and the factory, you also take away the kind of, eventually the webs of connection that were around those things. And what the result of that is this kind of atomization of people falling back into their own private states. And you notice that one of the big themes of the US election was drugs. The amount of young people in the US who are on drugs. You know, this became a key fact. And Trump's appeal was his appearing to care about this and talk about it.
So this,
yeah.
This subversion which you were talking about, I think is exactly the subversion of immediacy and mediation. I mean, as if maybe at the time that Lukacs was writing this,
yeah.
Immediacy was the logic by which capitalism was dictating subjects to think about in terms of to think about themselves in terms of their abilities to gain consciousness, while mediation was actually the way to gain the proper consciousness. But now seems to be, something that was striking for me when I was reading this was that now that everything is mediated, that everyone is mediated, immediacy seems to be more of a radical practice.
No, because immediacy is like, I don't think that's, what do you mean by mediated though? I think it's conflating two senses of mediated. It is conflating this Hegelian Marxist sense of mediated with a more ordinary sense of mediated. I mean, mediated just means part of it, like, where means that it's not immediately given an experience, and it really has some relation to totality. Right? That's I think what's at stake for Lukacs here. It's not that people are now in a totality. What is that? Sorry, come on.
Yeah, they are. I mean, those still are in a sort of totality.
Well, it's not that they're conscious of being in a totality.
Well, I think having the consciousness is much harder because the capitalists, I mean, if the bourgeoisie as the masters of the capitalist order were incapable of understanding that system of interrelations, and now masters of today's capitalism are very well aware of it because they create something like Facebook, so they must be aware of it. So I guess there is still some sort of totality at work, but it is deeply mediated, as it was like maybe 200 years ago, 100 and something years ago, but the ones who create it are aware of it. They know it. It's not that they are incapable. I mean, the bourgeoisie was incapable of being conscious of that interrelationship between the economical figures and stuff like that. No?
Well, I mean, why does Mark Zuckerberg create Facebook? Why does Mark Zuckerberg create Facebook? What does he do it for?
Because at the moment he created it, he didn't know, but it took him a while to understand that.
Well, he doesn't know, but something might know. You see, that's the thing. Like capital can know, right? Capital can know because capital's like evolution that selects for things. It's I think this is the. Capital has agency. Mark Zuckerberg has a kind of just idiotic compulsion to like, I want to make lots of money and like, I want to impress some girls, like as we see in the Social Network, which is a fantastic film, I think. Really, just it's almost unprecedented, the other Social Network, don't you think? In terms of that, you film an actually existing and also the meticulousness of the construction of the historical moment in terms of the forms of technology. But that's we'll come to that later. But the so he has those motives, right? It doesn't mean that capital doesn't have its own and designs inside, right? Without there being any conscious agent, that's sitting behind it all. Otherwise, it's just a conspiracy, isn't it? It's a systemic tendency. Now, of course, at a certain point, there are humans who make self-conscious decisions at crucial points of that. But there are also people like Zuckerberg who are the puppets of capital, without any kind of reflection, surely.
The reason I was asking
Yeah.
was because of this notion of, immediacy and mediation being dialectically interlinked.
Okay.
Because that I guess I don't fully understand. I mean, I don't know how to understand it.
Yeah.
Because in a way, immediacy has to be we have to sidestep from immediacy or just pass it behind and reach consciousness through some kind of mediation. But on the other hand, when we were talking about these possibilities for social mobility and how hard it actually is, that people, they get stuck up to some degree to the immediate environment to which they are given, that means that immediacy cannot totally be stepped behind.
Yeah, right, okay. No, I just thought we could have a look at some actual quotations. So that's why I was messing around with Okay, 4, I think. This is good. What is immediacy? An illusion which is itself the product of the habits of thought or feeling of mere immediacy, where the immediately given form of the objects, the fact that they're existing here and now in this particular way, appears to be primary, real, and objective, whereas their relations seem to be secondary and subjective. Unable to discover further mediations, and unable to comprehend the reality and the origin of the bourgeois society as the product of the same subject that created, comprehended social entities in nature. Its ultimate point of view, decisive role of thought, will be that of immediacy, bourgeois thought. But the observer stands outside the landscape, for were this not the case, it would not be possible for nature to become a landscape at all. So in order to see things, as outside you can't be in them. So the historical knowledge of the proletariat begins with knowledge of the present, with the self-knowledge of its own social situation and the elucidation of its necessity. Yeah, mediation would not be possible were it not for the fact that the empirical existence of objects is itself mediated, only appears to be unmediated, insofar as the awareness of mediation is lacking, so the objects are torn from the complex of their true determinants and placed in artificial isolation. So if the bourgeoisie is held fast in a minor immediacy from which the proletariat is able to perpetuate itself, it's neither purely accidental nor purely theoretical scientific problem. Right, let's read a bit more because it does. I think it's kind of quite nice to go back to it actually when we've had this discussion because it does immediately seem less opaque, right? I think it might not be leaping off the page, but I think it does. It does seem more tractable and lucid after the discussion, at least. For the proletariat social reality, this is 11, appears in the first instance as the pure object of societal events in every aspect of daily life in which the individual worker imagines himself to be the subject of his own life. He finds this to be an illusion that is destroyed by the immediacy of his existence. Because of the split between objectivity, subjectivity and objectivity induced in man by the compulsion to objectify himself as a commodity, situation becomes one that can be made conscious. So above all, the worker can only become conscious of his existence in society when he becomes aware of himself as a commodity. So that's part of this dialectical process. So it has to, first of all, accept the objectification of himself, or the objectification of herself. As we have seen, as a media existence integrates this pure and naked object into the production process. Once this immediacy is through the consequence of a multiplicity of mediations, once it becomes evident how much it presupposes, then the fetishistic forms of the commodity system begin to dissolve. Right. In the commodity, the worker recognizes himself and his own relations with capital. Inasmuch as he's incapable in practice of raising himself above the role of object, his consciousness is the self-consciousness of the commodity. Or in other words, it is the knowledge, the self-knowledge, the self-revelation of the capital society founded on the production and exchange of commodities. Okay, so there's a number of things there, isn't it? But when fetishism dissolves, what is fetishism? It's a big question, but in a Marxist sense, it is then this magicking away of the totality, or magicking away of the conditions, the actual material conditions which produce something. Something, so sorry, yes, please. Yeah.
Visualization seems to be quite contrary to reification. If reification tries to make everything that could be abstractly fluid, then it gets concrete.
Yeah.
But fetishization tries to conceal the actual concreteness of how things take place.
Right, good, yeah.
In the SEO of mystification, something.
Right. But that's obviously work together. Yeah. Complementary processes, yeah. Yeah, so when the worker knows himself as a commodity, his knowledge is practical. That is to say, the knowledge brings about objective structural change in the object of knowledge. That's what I was trying to say earlier. It's immediately changes things. That's immediately given. In this conscious system, through it, the special subjective character of labour as a commodity, its use value, its ability to yield certain produce, which every use value is submerged without trace in a quantitative exchange of categories of capitalism, now awakens and becomes social reality. The special nature of labour as a commodity, which in the absence of this consciousness acts as an unacknowledged driving wheel in the economic process, now objectives itself by means of this consciousness. Yeah. The fact that this commodity is able to become aware of its existence as a commodity does not suffice to eliminate the problem. For the unmediated consciousness of the commodity is a conformity with the simple form in which it manifests itself, precisely in awareness of abstract isolation and of a merely abstract relationship, external to consciousness, to those factors that create essential. So it's not enough just to think I am a commodity. The more has to be done than that. Thus, the knowledge that the social effects are not objects but relations between men. Sick, heavily gendered, is intensified to the point where facts are wholly dissolved into processes. The image of a frozen reality that nevertheless is caught up in an unremitting ghostly movement that once becomes meaningful when this reality is dissolved into the process of which man is the driving force. This can be seen only from the standpoint of the proletariat, because the meaning of these tendencies is the abolition of capitalism, and so for the bourgeoisie to become conscious of them will be tantamount to suicide. So yeah, the bourgeois, that's partly why bourgeois class consciousness can never really fully exist. Because it's, I mean, the bourgeoisie can have consciousness and can have common interests, the class. Clearly they do. But they can't have consciousness of the class system, you could say. If you had consciousness, only the proletariat can have the consciousness, can have common interests and shared consciousness and the consciousness of the class system. You know, because the bourgeoisie are products of the class system, right? By their nature, that's what they are. They're the products and the reproducers of the class system. The proletariat is the destroyer of the class system. So the bourgeoisie only exists in the class system. The proletariat exists both inside it and outside it. Okay, because it has to be that way. Because it has to be inside it. Well, because it is, isn't it? That's the way we are. It's capitalism. But it has to be also partly outside it, or there'll never be any possibility of movement to the outside. But as soon as mankind has clearly understood and hence restructured the foundations of existence, truth acquires a wholly novel aspect. When theory and practice are united, it becomes possible to change reality. And when this happens, the absolute and its relativistic counterpart will have played their historical role for the last time. For as a result of these changes, we shall see the disappearance of the reality which the absolute and the relative expressed in like manner. There is no absolute because there is no ultimate, because everything dissolves into a process at this point. And see, everything, I think this is what he's suggesting, right? This massive de-reification, and the opening up of possibility to change reality at every level. This process begins when the proletariat becomes conscious of its own class point of view. The individual can never become the measure of things, for when the individual confronts objective reality, he is faced by complex and ready-made and unalterable objects which allow him only the subjective response of recognition or rejection. Only the class can relate to the whole of reality in a practical revolutionary way. And like I say, I think we can, with Nancy Hartsock, you can see that this concept of class can be replaced by other forms of subordination. Reification is then the necessary immediate reality of every person living in capitalist society, and be overcome only by constant and constantly renewed efforts to disrupt the reified structure of existence by concretely relating to the concretely manifested contradictions of the total development, by becoming conscious of the immanent meanings of these contradictions for the total development. So it's, totality versus immediacy again. The reality is not, it becomes. So there is no fixed form of reality. That's itself for reification. Reality is only a process of becoming. It's good. For possibility to be realised, for tendency to become actual, what is really required is that the objective components of the society should be transformed, their functions must be changed with them, and with them the structure and content of every individual content. But it must never be forgotten. Only the practical class consciousness of the proletariat possesses this ability to transform things. Every contemplative, purely cognitive stance leads ultimately to divided relationship to its object. Even the proletariat can overcome reification as long as it is oriented towards practice. Right, so there's the emphasis on practice. So the practical class consciousness. So he's trying to unite these two things which seem to be, which perhaps in bourgeois feminists would be opposite, which would be, consciousness and practice. And so that the class communication, class consciousness is always practical in that way. Anyway, it's a difference from the ordinary sense in which we use the word consciousness. It doesn't, consciousness is there. It's not like, it doesn't require a practice to sustain it. The brain will do it for you, regardless. Some kind of practice, some level. Right, so it's not that I think that having with that quickly we can now go home happy, but I think that it's that's separate. I think it's kind of worth reading them out loud, actually. Particularly reading on screen, the brain just tends to skip ahead and all of that. Because, it's not obscurantist, it's just heavily stylized because of the inheritance of Hegel and in particular with this question of immediacy and immediacy. Right, so I think we can take this forward then as I will say is the key problem that Welly talked about today. The question of consciousness. So this is the question I think that's posing for the rest of the module is how did the consciousness how does consciousness get raised and how does it get depressed? And next week we'll look at ways in which it was raised. It's the last gasp. As you said, this is from the book, The Last Days of the Working Class, Staying Alive, The Last Days of the Working Class. But it wasn't just a kind of fade out. It was dramatic. Like what happened in the early 70s then was what happened in the early 70s in the US and in Italy and other countries that going on until later into the 70s, was the development of a new kind of democratic socialism, libertarian communism, which had broke from the old authoritarian structures of Cold War labour. It was also about making existential demands about quality of work. A lot of trade unions had accepted that they were basically arguing about wages. Not so much about what work would actually be like, what life would actually be like. The ultimate aim was getting rid of work anyway. In the early 70s in the US, as we've seen this week, then there's this kind of explosions of this kind of new consciousness, which was, as I was saying, post-women's intersectionality, with women's movement, the women's movement becoming articulated with workers, articulated with civil rights and post-civil rights kind of struggles. An explosive, potentially explosive combination of alliances of bourgeois and this kind of aching quality. I don't really know how we're going to approach this text next week, because it's very different to this. I mean, it's a historical narrative text. It's not a theoretical text. In a way, it's easier to. No matter how difficult a theoretical text is, it's easier to teach in a way because you can do concepts. Where this is a story, So I don't know how we'll deal with it. But I mean, try to come in with something. No.
Okay. There is this differentiation between two phases in the modern society of capitalism. You have the Bois society, and then you have the Proletariat, which is seen as a crisis that needs to be overcome. No, it's not because capitalism needs to be overcome.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm really confused there. Yes. So the Proletariat is a product of the So basically, both share the same reputation of the objectivity of the social existence in sense of they raise same immediacy, but in a different level of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So the bourgeois seen as so they can be seen as isolated from social reality, and even though they appear as conscious subject, they seem to there is